Hey, it's Nick with B&H, and we are live here at the B&H Superstore, here in our Tech Corner specifically, and today we're here to talk about the two new flagship cameras Canon just announced, the R5 Mark II and the EOS R1. And there is a lot to talk about with these. There's a lot of new features, and fortunately to help me with this, we have an amazing panel of experts in photography, video, and general Canon to kind of walk us through what is new here. So let's do some introductions. I'll start with you, Simon.
Hi, I'm Simon Bruty. I'm a Canon Explorer of Light, and I photograph sports.
Amazing. I love that title. Explorer of Light is, I think, the best title for like an ambassador for that. It just sounds so lofty. But I'll be picking your brain too, because I also got some hands-on time with the R1 as well. And Vanessa.
Hello, I'm Vanessa Joy. I'm also an explorer of light, and I concentrate on portraits, weddings, and corporate work. And I had my hands on the EOS R5 Mark II.
Yes, you were telling me before you started, usually these are such whirlwind experiences of hands-on time, but you actually got to kind of take your time with the R5 Mark II.
I had it for 3 days.
Oh my God.
3 days.
Love that luxury. And then Rebecca.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Nichols, and I'm the Director of Education, Field, and Sales Support for Canon USA. And I manage a team of incredibly talented tech experts who focus on all of our imaging products, cameras, lenses, cinema products, displays, and we cater to the professional photographer, content creator, and cinematographer.
So I'm assuming you have been very busy as of the past couple of days, weeks.
I feel bad. I've had a little bit more time with both of the cameras, and it's impressive.
Awesome. And then finally, Paul.
Hi, I'm Paul Hawxhurst, also with Canon USA. I'm a senior technical specialist. I'm out in New York City, so this was nice. It's a quick subway ride to get down here. But my main concentration has always been in the cinema side of things, and I come from the cinema EOS side of Canon. But they're pulling me in here because these two cameras, they've got a lot of cinema EOS part of them, so it's cool to talk about this. Yeah.
Gotcha. So what I'm hearing is the technical questions I can direct to you.
Yeah, please.
Yes, amazing.
Please. Yeah.
Someone's got to be in the hot seat. Now, what we'll be doing is, as we're discussing, please feel free to drop any questions in the chat that you have, and our team will try to answer as many as they can in the chat, but we'll also set some time aside at the end to cover any questions we maybe didn't get to. But to get started, obviously we're talking about two cameras here, but there's a lot of kind of overlap in terms of the new features with them. But to kind of just lay the groundwork, I suppose for Rebecca and Paul, this will be for you. Can you kind of give me the elevator pitch on what these cameras are, what's been improved with them, and kind of who they're both aimed for?
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'll start with one.
Okay.
I'm going to grab it. So the EOS R1, this is the long-awaited flagship camera of the EOS R series. This is the pinnacle of technology, accuracy, autofocus, durability. This is the top of the line. This is our R1 series cameras have gone back for a while, and they are relied upon by professionals to have amazing image quality and make their jobs easier. So no different with the EOS R1. It is 24 megapixels and shoots 40 frames per second, even with 14-bit RAW, which is awesome. And as you mentioned, there are a lot of shared features with the R5 Mark II, specifically the autofocus. Incredibly improved autofocus, super fast and really accurate.
Wow. That was so thorough. Thank you for tuning into the live stream, everyone. I make sure now. And then the R5 Mark II, Paul, I know that's about a mile away from you, so you don't have to
grab it. I don't want it. All right, I'll take it. Sure, why not? All right, the R5 Mark II. Again, this is continuing that tradition of our 5 series of cameras, all back from the 5D right now. And the big thing I think people are asking are like, what's the big difference between this and the R5, the original R5? Yep. Again, 45 megapixel back illuminated stacked sensor. And that's huge, because what that does is that really helps improve our autofocus with these systems as well as increase that readout speed. So now we got, for stills, we got 30 frames per second out there. Boom, so much faster, so cool. But where this camera really shines is the video side of things. 8K up to 60 frames per second in RAW, all internal recording to CF Express cards. You also got a new SRAW mode on there, which you can actually use the full sensor recording 4K in RAW. These are options that we just kind of don't get anywhere else with these cameras. So there's a lot to talk about, especially on the video side with the R5 Mark II.
Yes, and we will definitely be talking about just video specifically on both of these cameras, because there's a lot to talk about there. But to kind of get started, we have to pick some point to discuss these new features. And I think autofocus is a good place to start, but also specifically with this Digic accelerator, because there's, just in my education with these cameras, that has been said a lot in terms of the improvements that can bring. So both in terms of like subject recognition and autofocus performance, I suppose, once again, for Rebecca and Paul, this is more for you. Kind of what is this, and what are the specific kind of upgrades that it brings?
Well, so we have always had Digic processors in the EOS R series, which enable speed, performance of the camera. Well, now we do have a Digic X processor, but we also have a Digic accelerator, which kind of boosts the performance of the autofocus, the shooting speed, the low light performance. It really accelerates it. And that's in both cameras, and I really see it in the autofocus.
Yes.
I mean, it is incredibly responsive. The tracking is unbelievable. It really boosts all of the features.
Yeah.
Yes. So actually, for Simon and Vanessa, you both, as sports and wedding photographers, are doing mission critical work in different ways. But how typically when you're shooting, I suppose I should start with one of you. So I'll start with you, Simon. For sports photography, is there a specific focus mode you usually live in? Are you bouncing between different modes depending on the shooting situation? Like, what's kind of your MO for when you're approaching a high-intensity sports game?
Well, you're looking for reliability, and you need to trust that autofocus system. That's the most important part to it. And once you have that, then depending on the sport you're photographing, and I mean you can see it, and the R1 in particular, it's just 25-30% quicker than the R3. So I mean those numbers make a difference in split-second sports.
Yes, and did you get to do any of the action priority modes with the camera when you?
I did. I played around with them, but I tried the eye control. I tried a few of the other measures, but all of it seemed pretty good.
Amazing. And then Vanessa, ideally, a wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime event for a couple, so I'm assuming the intention is obviously to make sure that you are not missing any of those shots. You mostly played with the R5 Mark II, so do you, like for the 45 megapixel sensor, is that more desirable for portraits and what clients are expecting in a package after a wedding is done? Or what are you usually focusing on with your coverage and what you're photographing or video recording during a wedding?
I'm covering all of it and doing it in a way where it has to be unobtrusive. Mm-hmm. So for me, the Canon EOS R5 Mark II having 45 megapixels, I can crop to my heart's content. And of course, we'll get into upscaling later, but that camera for me, it helps me be able to capture things without being obtrusive. Yep. And then with the autofocus technology being so good and something that I don't have to dwell on or honestly even concentrate on that much, it lets me connect with whoever I'm photographing. That's such a big part of who I am as a photographer, and the job I have to do is the client experience, whether it's being present at a wedding or trying to pull emotion out of the portrait that I'm creating. Being able to be more present because the camera is doing a lot of the thinking for me helps every part of what I do.
There's actually one thing I was curious about, because I've never photographed a wedding, but is the actual size of the camera and its footprint and level of obtrusiveness, is that beyond just the portability of being able to move effectively, does that actually make a difference to people in the wedding? Do you feel like you can get more natural photos, for lack of a better term?
It can help you get more natural photos. That is a little bit more with the lens.
Yeah.
But the part that most people don't even think about, it's not necessarily the person that I'm photographing. It's during those moments like the ceremony, the bride or groom walking down the aisle, the first kiss. If I have to be close to them and be standing in the way where my back is to guests, those guests, without ever seeing a photo of mine, are going to assume I'm a horrible photographer because I'm obtrusive. And it seems silly, but being able to separate myself from the main action but still get in close because of a longer lens, because of I use my internal camera crop to 1.6 mode, and I can get in closer without being the center of attention, which I certainly don't want to be.
And you actually teased this, but it's a perfect segue to go right into this. Another advantage to the Digic accelerator on both cameras is in-image upscaling. There's a lot to talk about with what the digital accelerator can do. But for both cameras, it can essentially quadruple the resolution of the image you have. Now, I know there's some factors to it, like it has to start with a JPEG, but I guess once again, we'll talk to you, Paul and Rebecca. For both cameras, it's essentially the same process though, right? It's just the difference in megapixel determines how big the image can get.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, and we call it the in-camera neural network upscaling. And basically what it can do is it can give you a 2 times resolution boost in both directions from your image. So say on the R1 with the 24 megapixel, you can get up to 96 megapixel then. On the R5 Mark II, you're boosting in both ways. You're going up to 179 megapixel image from there. And so the thing is that we had this before, but it was through a cloud service, through our DPP software that we're using. But this is the first time we're putting them in the camera. And now with the digital accelerator in there, we can make that process really fast. It happens in camera, you can have it, boom, really quickly. So you get your images at the right resolution just so much faster than having to go through all the post stuff. And
yeah, no, I did get to demo that in person. It was
And it's fast.
3 seconds.
Yeah,
I don't. Yeah, it
incredibly
just
fast.
sped through. So it's really cool to have. And especially even for the R1, if you're concerned about a 24 megapixel sensor, you essentially have the option to really get more megapixels out of it if that's what your end goal is. Now, another thing I was curious about with both of these is the video capabilities on them as well. Now, they've both kind of seen upgrades from their immediate predecessors. I know, Paul, you kind of gave the highlight features, but internal RAW on both of them.
Yes, that's correct.
8K or 6K.
Yeah, that's right. So again, it follows the resolution of the sensors, right? So on the R1, you have 6K up to 60p internal RAW recording, and that's recorded to those CF Express cards there. And you have the dual slot CF Express cards. Now, one thing I want to point out before I talk about the RAW on the other camera, and one of the neat things that we've put into both of these cameras now is that we now have a proxy recording. I think it's the first time in this line of cameras. This is something taken from Cinema EOS, put in there. So that means that I can be recording my 6K on the R1 in RAW, right there, and also recording to the second card slot a much lower resolution, lower bit depth, easy, gradable file that I can hand off to my editor right away and just have them start going without having to deal with the full size. This is such a common workflow in the cinema and video world, and this is the first time that we've pulled it into the R series of cameras. So it's a huge, huge thing for these cameras. Yeah.
And the R1 is dual CF Express B slots, and the R5 Mark II, you get one CF Express B and then CF Express B and SD card
SD card, and then you can use that SD card for the proxies as well on the R5 Mark II.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
One thing I'm just genuinely interested to talk about is the action priority modes on this, because I was told what it did, but I didn't really become a believer until I saw it in person, because I'm sure you can explain it better, but essentially you can tailor either camera for specific sporting events. I think soccer, basketball, and volleyball are available right now, where the camera essentially understands the context of what it's looking at and can predict where it should be focusing based on that context. Like the test that we did in our video was I had 2 people coming towards me dribbling a soccer ball back and forth, and I set the action priority to soccer, and it focused on the person with the ball because it understood they had the ball, and then when they passed it to the next person, before the ball even got to them, I saw the little focus bar, like square, shift to that person, and that was it's easy to get kind of cynical and jaded with camera upgrades. They're usually pretty incremental. You know what to see. That was one moment where I was taken aback. That was just so cool. And I wish that I'd had a basketball court and a volleyball court to play with all of them. But that action priority mode is also brought about by the digital accelerator too.
It is. It's, in the past we've had auto tracking of heads, faces, eyes. But with the digital accelerator and the new AF system, we're not only tracking the head, we're tracking joint movements. So it's able to predict somebody that would be catching a pass, or in soccer, maybe doing a header, and how that ball is going to act. So it's really focusing on the priority of the situation and choosing the appropriate subject to focus on.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
It's genuinely very cool. That's not marketing fluff. That was a very cool thing to actually play with in practice. Now, on the note of just brand new features both cameras have, pre-continuous shooting on both of these, up to 20 frames per second prior to fully pressing the shutter on the R1 and 15, I believe,
That's
on
correct.
the R5 too.
Yeah.
Now, for you, Simon and Vanessa, did you get either of you get a chance to take advantage and see what the pre-continuous shooting looked like in practice?
Yeah, I mean, I tried it. I mean, I think it's, part of it is using it and getting to understand how it's going to really help you. And understanding in silent mode that I'm taking 15 images before I even have taken a photograph.
Yes.
So it's something that you would adapt to as a photographer, but I mean, that function is going to be sort of a game changer.
Yeah. Yes, certainly, because I've whiffed many shots by not having that feature. Did you experience that with any of the wedding photography?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's really like a moment saver because the second you're pressing down on the shutter, which I'm doing most of the time to track whatever I'm tracking, I'm not perfect. Sometimes the movement happens too fast. Sometimes I'm a little bit too late. And just having that safety net, it just ensures I can do my job that much better.
I'm assuming, I don't know if there's ever a moment where like the bouquet toss is just like a second too late.
It's usually the kiss.
Oh, really?
So sometimes, usually in Catholic ceremonies, the priest will have them kiss kind of right after they put the rings on instead of at the end of the ceremony. And you never know if that's going to happen. And all of a sudden, and then some people just kind of like peck and run away. And it's like, did they even kiss? I don't know, but...
Being thwarted by unpredictable kissing is not something I anticipated you'd have to be aware of as a wedding photographer, but I guess...
It's a big moment.
I mean, there's already
there's
already a story coming from the Euro soccer champs where there's a goal sequence and there's all this, the main shot was taken with the pre-shoot. So, yeah, there it is.
Wow.
Hard evidence, it works.
Definitive concrete proof right there.
Yeah.
Now, another thing, Vanessa, I was curious, I guess for both of you, are either of you shooting any video during any of your events, or do you usually, I know it's with professional sports photography, it's usually photography.
It's a walled garden.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
no chance.
The moment you switch to video mode, you're out.
I'm out. Yeah.
But Vanessa, do you kind of get to switch?
Yes, and that's why I was so excited for this one. We've got the video switch button. So good. So that's great for me. It's also nice. I can take pictures while I'm shooting video.
Yes.
Without any blackout, without any pause or skip in the video. Because I do go back and forth, and sometimes it's just a little bit of video that I'm going to make social content for later. Being able to shoot ultra slow-mo at 240 frames per second is like, it's smooth like butter. It's so nice. And it just makes for larger-than-life, epic shots. And then, for my own YouTube channel, I'm always messing around with video. So I'm happy that they made this more of a hybrid camera because that's exactly what I need.
Yeah, if there was one word to kind of summarize this as a thesis statement, I feel like versatility is very much what the R5 Mark II kind of excels at. But actually, one question that's already come in from the chat, which I guess is open for everyone, is it worth upgrading over the R3? Which is actually interesting because I feel like the R1 is the successor, but the R5 Mark II does bring over a lot of those same features. So I guess I'll open this to the panel. Is it worth upgrading over the R3?
Well, the quick answer is yes.
Well,
we're here at B&H.
Yes. Available now on bnh.com.
I think the most important thing is, what are you photographing?
Yeah.
That's the first question you should ask yourself. If you're photographing sports, you need every little thing helps you get a great photograph. Because it's such a, it happens within a fraction of a second. So you need those advantages.
Yes, if this is your livelihood, if this is how you make your money, those incremental upgrades can really add up. And so, yes, I would say, to paraphrase Simon, if that is worth it to you, then I think it's absolutely worth upgrading. But as I was looking at the specs, the R5 Mark II seems to inherit quite a bit from the R3. Things like the EVF, I think, is now the same one as the R3 had. Yeah. And then autofocus performance, I know we already touched on this a little bit, but technically the R1 is the top tier, highest end, and the R5 Mark II is very close behind it, but could you kind of explain what the differences are between those two focusing systems?
Sure, and it's interesting you bring up an upgrade from the R3. The R3 is a workhorse. It's a fantastic camera. Yeah. I'm not taking away from that at all, but the autofocus advances that we have in both of these cameras is superior. So it's really a step up with either of them. And there's only a small difference in the autofocus performance between the two cameras, the R1 and the R5 Mark II. Otherwise, they are built the same way.
Yeah. It was enough of a step up that we renamed the system, basically.
Yes.
So dual pixel intelligent autofocus now. And one of the big things with the R1 and the big difference there is now the cross-type diodes that we have on the sensor. And that's really the big thing that's going to elevate that autofocus, well beyond anything we've ever made.
I think if I can pipe in,
Please.
I think these two cameras, especially coming out at the same time, have really separated the lines of photography and the photographers. Like the R1 is specifically meant for you. It's meant for exactly what you do.
Thanks, Canon.
Yeah.
It's the Simon camera. That's just what Canon should call it.
Yeah, while the EOS R5 Mark II, it's like my camera. And I come from typically shooting with this style body. I've loved the 1DX series. I actually shot with the R3 a ton. And then when the R6 II came out, and that autofocus technology is just amazing. And then now this, I've actually stepped away from the flagship camera line because I've realized that it's no longer the camera that's meant for what I do. And for what I do, now it's going to be this R5 Mark II series. It is made for me.
Yeah, because even though the R1 is giving you the maximum burst rate you can get on a Canon camera, 30 frames per second on 45 megapixel image is still not bad. Like, that is still absolutely usable, I'm assuming, especially for weddings.
Yeah, and I don't want to shoot anywhere near that. Like, no thank you. I don't want to call that later.
Paul, I think this is the point where the technical questions come up, and I might grill you a little bit, just specifically with video features especially, because these are extremely capable video cameras as well. I feel like I've learned the way Canon takes if a Canon camera has CLog 2 in it, I love CLog 2. It's my favorite thing to grade in, and both of these cameras have it in them.
Yeah.
That is obviously great, but then full-on internal RAW as well. So could you talk a little bit about recording capabilities and then also that S-RAW, because is that new? Has that been around?
Yeah.
Is this
let me just kind of start with the top here. Both, like you said, both of these cameras, this is the first time we've put Canon Log 2 into this series of cameras.
Yes, it's usually cinema exclusive.
It's always a cinema exclusive, and that's probably why I'm here, because you can see all these features that are coming over from the cinema side. Canon Log 2 is the huge one. It's the one that opens up the dynamic range of the sensor for the video user. On top of that, because we have that now, the new RAW system that we have in there, the files of the RAW, can be developed in our Canon RAW developer that we use for the cinema as well. So you have access to all the post-production gammas and color gamuts, and that workflow is now available with these cameras. So I can take that, the Canon Log 2, process it and edit it the same as I would my Cinema EOS footage, mix and match, very easy. It unifies the workflow between the two systems, finally. But yeah, so other than that, we got that. I don't know, that's the big thing for me. Like, really, I'm just really so concentrated about having Canon Log 2 finally in these cameras, because it's always been Canon Log 3. You've always had to do some crazy workaround to get your full dynamic range. But now we got it. We also have the new Codecs as well.
Yes.
The XF AVCS and the XF HEVCS. We just announced these codecs with the C400. The C400's not even out yet. It's not shipping yet. And we just announced that for the cinema line. We're bringing those into these as well. So you can really see what's happening here. You can really see kind of the unification of the camera lines here and making these cameras much more proficient in the video world.
Yes. So in other words, these could function as B cameras to your Cinema EOS lineup and just integrate seamlessly.
Because one of the big things about these new codecs is that the file structure and file names are now shared amongst them. All right. So now we are sharing all that same structure with the Cinema EOS as well. So you don't have these wildly crazy different file names and file structures that you used to have. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
And then also, let me know if this is a first, but being able to record RAW internally on a Canon mirrorless camera, like not not the
first.
Well, the R5C technically.
R5C can do it in the previous camera, as the previous R5 could also record RAW as well. Yeah, so we had RAW recording, and the 1DX Mark III could do it. So we've had it in there before. But this is just a kind of reformulated version of the RAW now. Like I said, it plays much better with a lot of the NLEs out there, and as well as our Cinema line RAW. It's going to mix and match much easier.
And then one just quick point on the R5 Mark II. I understand there's a new battery that's launching alongside with this one, correct? The LPE6P?
Yeah.
Some combination of those letters and numbers?
The LPE6P, right? It is a new battery. It looks like the old LPE6 batteries. The big difference here is that it's now an 8.4 volt output. All the previous LPE6 batteries were 7.2 volt output. The reason it's a higher voltage output is to get to the higher frame rates in the RAW there, to get to that higher shooting speed of the 30 frames per second in stills. They just need to increase the voltage for that. And so, boom, new battery.
So to hit that 8K 60, you need to be having that battery in the camera, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gotcha. So another question that came in was someone asking about their capabilities. They say they're a wildlife still photographer, and we're wondering if you're not taking advantage of the video capabilities, kind of what do either of these cameras offer for more of like a wildlife photography? I don't know if either of you did any. I usually will, if we're testing wildlife photography, that usually involves us running to Central Park and trying to find some birds and squirrels. But I was curious if, I mean, what comes to my mind is the upscaling capabilities. Yep. If you have, maybe your focal length isn't quite long enough and you could zoom in as far as you could and digitally upscale those. But would you say there's any other advantages more for like wildlife photography that either of these camera bodies offer, and would you recommend one over another?
Sure. I mean, I think it depends on also what you're going to do with the images. Like you said, the R5 Mark II with the higher megapixel will allow you to zoom in, will allow you to crop part of the image and then upscale, all in camera. And then they both have incredible low light capability and a new neural network noise reduction.
Oh, yes. We haven't even, I think we even talked
which
about
is
that.
done
Yes.
in camera. And that is incredible. So if you're shooting wildlife, early morning shots, low light, both of them are going to be great. It really depends on what you need.
Yes.
I mean, they're similar. I mean, sports and wildlife,
Yes.
40 frames a second is going to obviously help you. As Rebecca is saying, the low light side of things is really going to, that's going to be great for you.
Well, because actually one thing that goes hand in hand with the neural network noise reduction is the maximum ISO you can get. On the R1, it is 102,400, something like that?
Yes, that's correct.
That's correct.
So you could potentially push the ISO further than you might have otherwise, and then rely on that neural network noise reduction to clean it up?
Yeah, the neural network noise reduction it's like magic.
It's wild.
It's you're going to want to use it only on like really high ISOs, like 6400. You probably won't even need it, and you can do it in camera.
Yep.
Incredibly fast. It used to be you would have to use like external software or a cloud-based solution, and now you do it all in camera. You can do that in camera and do the upscaling in camera all like in under a minute, in a couple seconds. It's great.
The image that is on the screen now, that I actually shot at 32,000 ISO, no flash, and I was absolutely blown away how clean it was just right out of camera at 32,000 ISO. But this is the before and after that neural network noise reduction. That's a mouthful. We need an acronym for that.
Hopefully everyone's watching on a big enough screen to see the difference, because it is impressive.
It is. I mean, look at the definition in his beard. It smoothed out lines even. The line between her shoulder and the background is even smoothed out, so it's creating more detail as well as reducing the noise. It is. I couldn't believe it when I first saw it.
No, it's amazing.
And I just want to add, it's not creating any detail that isn't actually
already there.
That's a good point, yes.
It's all your original image.
Real quick, to kind of double back, another question that came up when we were talking about the battery, someone was asking, do the old batteries, the LP6 batteries, still work on this? Is it just you can't shoot RAW on it? Is that correct?
So there are limitations with the older batteries. You can still use them. You will not have access to RAW. On the,
is that the only limit? Is otherwise other
pre-record as well? There's a couple other anything that's dealing with the fast, higher speed is going to be limited as well. But if you are shooting in XFAVCS or HEVCS, you can still use those. with the older batteries. So yeah, it just kind of depends on how hardcore you're going. So
Gotcha.
yeah.
And then on the batteries, the R1 also takes the same LPE19 as the R3, correct?
It does.
Yes,
That's correct. Yeah, and also the 1DX Mark III.
Oh,
if I
yep.
remember right.
Yep.
So if you have those,
So if
you
you're,
can carry
if
it
you're
over.
upgrading from 1DX Mark III, you can
Right.
keep your same batteries.
Exactly.
And keep chugging
Yeah.
along.
And getting back to the viewer who's shooting wildlife, I mean, that's a key deciding factor also, or if you're going to need that extra battery life that the R1 has.
Gotcha. Well, actually, I know we don't have them with us right now, but on the note of battery life also, the R5 Mark II is coming with 3 new accessories you can buy with it for grips.
Yeah.
Could you walk us through kind of what those 3 grips are?
Yeah, and basically they're kind of what you expect. There's a basic standard vertical grip, which will add, an extra battery slot, and then all the vertical functionality. Then there is the Ethernet grip, which also adds the vertical functionality, but also a 2.5G Ethernet port on
Yep.
there. And then finally, this is kind of the big one. It's the cooling fan grip. So this is the one that's going to pop on there. You're going to kick up that fan speed. It's going to increase your usable shooting time. And then it also gives you a 2.5G Ethernet port as well.
Wow. And the
As
R1
well as
has
the-
that built in, but if you get this grip, you can then add that functionality to
Exactly.
the R5 Mark
yeah.
II.
Yeah. R1 has all that stuff built in.
Yes.
So yeah.
The R1 is the kitchen sink camera. Everything is thrown in that one.
Simon camera.
Oh my!
Sorry.
Where are my manners? Yes, the Simon camera.
Yeah.
The kitchen sink Simon camera. Yes. Canon marketing. You can change that, right? It's not too late to
Simon
change the name.
says.
Yes.
Perfect.
We said at the beginning we were going to drop a lot more Simon Says jokes. I think we've shown tasteful restraint that we have not deferred to you in every single thing, because Simon said. Now, one thing we just very briefly mentioned, but I think we should talk more in depth, the EVFs on both cameras as well. The eye focus feature I know we mentioned, but I didn't really get much hands-on time with the R3, and I never played with the eye focus, and that was bonkers. So unfortunately, it's literally impossible to kind of demo it. You can't do a screen recording, but basically you calibrate an eyeball to the EVF, and then once you've done this process, whatever your eye is looking at is kind of you can essentially, you'll get a reticle, and then you can half press the shutter to focus on what your eye is looking at. And both cameras offer this now, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do either of you use that? Oh, you're
Oh
nodding.
yeah. I mean, I love the R3, and that was one of the first cameras, aside from the older one, that had that functionality, and it worked. It was really cool, but both of these cameras now, that is so smooth. The eye control autofocus is so smooth, and it's fast and wildly more accurate than the R3.
Yeah.
So it is something that I will be using. For example, on dance floors, I change my focus a lot because I'm going from this crazy person to that crazy person to the kid spinning around, and being able to focus as fast as my eyeball moves is unreal.
Yes. Did you use that as well?
I did. I used it one time on the R3 and never used it again. But the R1, I left it on.
Really?
Yeah. So I was using it a lot. It's impressive.
Yes. No. And once again, the fact that you're getting this with both cameras is great to have. Another thing you're getting with both cameras that once again came over from the R3, pre-registered person priority. This was hugely helpful to be able to use. So if you've shot with previous, like the R3, you probably know this, but you can essentially tell the camera who you wanted to focus on and rank those people. So if you're at an event like, let's say, a sports game or a wedding, you could essentially mark the bride and the groom in a wedding as, you probably should do the bride as 1 and the groom as 2. How do you prioritize them?
If it's a bride and groom, then I prioritize the bride. But the cool thing is you don't even have to do that on site. If you did an engagement session with them, or if they just send you a headshot,
Yes.
you can preload it from
any
a
still
card.
image. You can,
Yes, and just have it done beforehand. And I think with the R1, it's like you can register by that method 10.
Yeah.
But then even
Yeah.
more if you have it on the card.
No, 10 is
10. Okay,
Yeah,
so 10 people. So
and
for
then
sports,
you could prioritize
Yes.
those people. So you
Yes.
could have mother of the bride as 3.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
You can create the
It's
hierarchy
really
of
incredible.
Create a
who's the
hierarchy.
most important for focus, right?
So when you're shooting with the Simon camera, you're able to, if you know everyone who's going to be on the team, you can
Sure.
in advance just prioritize them if you want
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I used it briefly, and it worked.
Yep.
And this little icon pops up.
Yeah, the icon.
Yes, it's so reassuring. You get
Yeah.
this little icon in the lower, and it will let you know. It'll even let you know if it understands that there's another person there, but it won't necessarily go to that person if you don't want it to.
And it picks up the profile. It picks up one eye. It doesn't have to be straight on. It's really incredible.
Sorry, I'm just checking some questions that have come in from the chat. One question is, how will the autofocus work for video? Is the accuracy any better than the R3?
So it's carrying over with that new digital accelerator that we have in there.
Yep.
So yeah, so it's carrying all of that stuff over from the still side into the video side as well. A lot of that. I mean, kind of the basic thing. You're not, I'm gonna say, in comparison, you're not going to get the eye control focus.
Gotcha.
You're not going to be able to use that in video. But most of the other features just carry over, and it's great. And they've improved the low light focusing on it, which is helpful for the video side of things. I was blown away when I first tried these out in video mode.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. So, yeah, it's definitely, I would say, a step up.
That's amazing. So, based on the questions, wildlife photographers coming in strong on this one. Another question was, I'd love to know if the face priority or face select only I think they're asking, could you use the face select to track animals, or does it only recognize humans?
I thought the same thing. I wondered the same thing, and I haven't tried it, but no, it's for people.
Okay.
But there is an animal mode.
There's animal eye tracking.
Eye tracking.
So the animal eye tracking still exists, but the specific priority. So if you have like a favorite pigeon and you want to prioritize that one, I don't know necessarily, or maybe how human the face looks, but I'd be curious myself
We'll
to try
have to
that.
test it.
Yeah, just see what I can get away with. And then once again, does any of the predictive movement, because I know there's a lot of predictive movement technology and modes that you can use with this, translate to birds in flight? Do we notice any of that translate to wildlife photography?
I haven't tried that either,
Okay.
Unfortunately. I am a bird photographer, so I will
wow.
test all of these. But it is made for human movement and human joints.
I think it's the skeletal
Right.
structure of a human, right?
Correct.
So maybe you get a dog to stand up on two legs. Maybe it will do something there.
Another question, and I think I might know the answer to this, but I'll still defer to you. Does the eye focus, the eye control, work with glasses?
It does, and it's way improved. Sorry, Paul.
No. That was for you. So
I used it.
way better.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
I had
So
glasses
I
on.
agree, it's incredibly
Tiny
improved.
eyes, glasses.
Also, light-colored eyes, like light blue eyes, were sometimes challenging on the R3. It's so much better.
Well, because I saw in the settings, you can set up like 6 eyes or something like that.
You can set up different calibrations to use for different atmospheres, different locations, different lightings.
Yes, I remember that was mentioned when I was playing with the camera, that you could, if you're in low light versus outdoors bright in the day, you can do that. Or if you wear glasses and sometimes contacts, you can calibrate those differently as well. So, myriad options.
Very customizable.
Well, actually, this wasn't a question, but it was one thing that I noticed when I was playing with the R1 specifically was the customization options on this camera. Now, any flagship camera, I mean, Canon cameras for ages, you've had tons and tons of options for how you want to customize it. But I was shown just the depth with which you could do this. Like, we only had, we're in the same boat in that we only had one very brief day to play with it. But the one thing I did get to test was, I think the AF3 button on the back, you could customize both the half press and the full press to do, the menu list just went on and on and on. You could set it to do whatever you wanted to. So is that something that...
Yeah, it's the AF on button.
Yes.
And it's special. It's a really special button. It actually does you can customize it 3 ways. It's a touch screen, so you can scroll your fingertip over it to select an autofocus point or move through your menu. And then press in fully for one feature and half press for a different feature. And you can feel the difference, whether you can feel the spring in there where the half step is and full. So really, you can set so many things to that one button that you don't have to move your hand at all. You're doing 3 different things.
Yeah.
Just by leaving your hand right where it is.
It made me wish I could just sit down with the camera for a weekend and just fully customize every little nitty-gritty piece of it. But if you order from B&H.com, you can have that luxury. Another question that came in, this is a little bit specific, but I'll still throw it out there. Does the R1 have in-camera focus stacking available?
Yeah, it does.
It does?
Yep.
Well, there you go. In-focus camera stacking is available. I'm trying to think. We still have some more questions coming in. I'm trying to think just even my own questions that I had. Well, I suppose I'll actually throw this out to you, Vanessa and Simon. Was there anything about these cameras that kind of changed the way you went about shooting? Or for the most part, did you kind of view them as just the logical extensions of what you're looking for in a camera and how they were able to improve? Like, increased accuracy with autofocus, subject detection, things like that. Did anything change in your shooting experience, either of you?
Well, being able to use flash and electronic shutter was pretty big.
Yes.
That was a big one. That is something that I would have to switch back and forth, and now if I want, I can leave it on electronic shutter. And if I leave it on electronic shutter, there is a new blur detection that the camera has.
Yes.
Yeah, and if you shoot on electronic shutter, it will help rate those images. You'll be able to see it in DPP off camera, but then also in camera, it will only show you the ones that are the most sharp. So like if you're reviewing your imagery, you're not like scrolling through absolutely everything you've shot. It's just hiding those blurry photos for you.
Gotcha.
And it even recognizes the difference between a blurry photo and a shutter drag, which is awesome because shutter drag is real big right now in weddings, let me tell you.
Because this is one thing you almost don't consider. Like obviously you want these cameras to perform well in the moment when it counts, but sometimes when you're going through your photos after, you can just save hours of your life by not having to sift through every single one of those 40 frame per second photos. Was that similar with you, would you say?
I mean, I think the pre-shoot is something that you're going to have to adapt to as a photographer. You're going to have to get to understand it. If you've got it on silent mode, as I do all the time, sometimes it's taking 15 frames, and I'm like, oh man. So you've got to adapt yourself as a photographer to this camera. There's so much information to sort of try and weed through, to say the least. And you're going to have to tailor it to what you photograph and how you shoot. That takes a little time.
Yes. I mean, I suppose it goes without saying. We've been saying the same thing in so many words. These cameras are for professional applications. So depending on how you use them, you will need to take the time to get to know them and get them to function in the way that you want them to, however you customize that. This is a fun question. It kind of combines two previous questions. In-camera focus stacking with flash? I feel like this is just like...
So glad you guys are here.
I can't answer
That's
that
one,
one
yeah.
right now.
That might be a firm maybe for now.
Yeah.
We can see if we can find that
I'm
out
not
a little bit later.
Maybe. I'm
Yes.
going to find out and
Yeah.
share that info.
And then one other question that came in, does Moiré appear in either of these cameras? They were mentioning that they noticed it sometimes in the R6. Is there any difference in the sensors here? Like would the backside illuminated stacked sensor help with that, or?
I mean, I'd have to test it with something that would cause a Moiré pattern, which with all of our current cameras is really hard to get.
Yes.
Yeah. But I mean, the thing is that, to talk about Moiré, it doesn't matter what camera you use, all cameras show Moiré. That's just the nature of the sensor, right? So I know on these that they do have a new low pass filter in both of these cameras, and so that is going to help quite a bit with the Moiré. So.
Okay, so also please keep in mind this is the first day these cameras are out, so I'm certainly hoping to get more hands-on time with these to kind of put them through their paces in other shooting situations. But as we get to play with them, we'll find out more. Now I think with that we've answered a lot of the questions that have come in with the chat. Thank you very much for the great questions. Now, I suppose kind of as we wrap up, was there anything else, Vanessa and Simon, that you want to say about these cameras? Any thoughts you had that we didn't get to? Any features I didn't chat about that you liked?
I mean, the viewfinder is, every camera seems to have one, obviously, but this one is pretty amazing.
Oh yeah, 9.44 million dots on the R1.
I'm glad you remember.
Yes. It's my job to remember. But yes, the viewfinder was phenomenal. And then blackout-free shooting, I believe, on both of them.
Yeah.
And 120 hertz refresh rate. It seemed...
In the viewfinder, yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yep.
But yeah,
So,
that
yeah.
blackout-free electronic viewfinder setting is incredibly helpful.
So yeah, performance is fantastic. And then the R5 Mark II is the 5.76 million dot, basically the same one that the R3 had.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Yep.
And then kind of same question for you. Were there any other things you noticed about the camera that really helped your shooting, or that you liked, or that we didn't get to talk about yet?
Well, the EVF along those lines from the Canon EOS R5, this one is larger. And it has more of an anti-fog coating, I believe, that's on it, or that just helps with fog, which is nice for humidity shooting, which happens a lot, especially if you're in the Northeast. When I photograph weddings, we're in and outside, and humidity and fog on my glass, and the EVF is something that I have to deal with. So just having it be slightly better is always going to be more helpful.
Awesome. Yeah, like I said, most of my time was with the R1, but I got like 3 minutes hands-on time with the R5 Mark II. Would love to play with it a little bit more, which hopefully we'll get to now that they are available to purchase from B&H.com. Nobody makes me say that. I just, it's what we're here for. Now, on that note, once again, I think we've kind of answered all of the questions that people asked in the chat, so I suppose we can wrap up. Thank you again so much, everyone, for coming, for sharing your experiences and your expertise on these cameras. Very, very exciting. These are essentially the new flagship cameras in Canon's mirrorless lineup, and it'll be very exciting to see how you all use them. So with that, I want to thank the panel once again for sitting in and sharing your thoughts. And that about wraps it up. Thank you for watching, and once again for your questions. I'm Nick with B&H, and we'll see you next time. Take care.